Joshua 13, Joshua 5, 13 and 14. Verse 13 says, and it came to pass, when Joshua was by Jericho, that he lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, there stood a man over the earth against him, with his sword drawn in his hand. And Joshua went over unto him, and said unto him, art thou for us, or for our adversaries? And he said, nay, but as captain of the hosts of the army am I now come. And Joshua fell on his face to the earth, and did worship, and said unto him, what saith my Lord unto his servant? And our subject for today is, whose side are you on?
All right.
Who's on the Lord's side?
All right.
Whose side are you on? Who's on the Lord's side?
All right, sir.
Now, I'm sure that everyone has played some type of game before and had teammates. You know, when I was growing up, we would play basketball outside, and when everybody looks alike, you know, before you pass the ball, you kind of become hesitant, and sometimes you have to ask, whose side are you on?
All right.
You know, and eventually it would lead to one side taking off their shirts, and we would play skin against shirts.
All right. Right. Amen.
Right. So now the scripture says in Joshua 5 and 13, and it came to pass when Joshua was by Jericho that he lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, there stood a man over against him with his sword drawn in his hand. And Joshua went unto him and said unto him, art thou for us or for our adversaries? Now see, what has taken place leading up to this is Moses has led the children of Israel out of Egypt. He's led them to the wilderness where they spent 40 years on what was supposed to be an 11-day journey.
My God.
So Moses, because of his disobedience, he was not permitted to lead the children of Israel into the promised land. So at this point, Moses is dead, and God reminds Joshua of the promise that he made to Moses, that every place that the sole of his foot shall tread upon had been given unto him. And he reminds him that he would be the one leading the children of Israel into the promised land, which is in the region of modern-day Turkey, Iran, Iraq, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia, in that region. Amen. So, and it came to pass, when Joshua was by Jericho, that he lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, there stood a man. So my first point is, in order for others to identify and or associate you with the Lord is, you have to look the part. That's number one. You have to look the part. So like I said, when Joshua lifted up his eyes and looked, and he saw this man, it caused him to ask the question, are you for us or our adversaries?
Right.
Okay, so apparently his appearance suggested that he could be on Joshua's side.
All right.
Now, it could have been his appearance, it could have been the proximity, how close he was to Joshua, we don't know, but the question was asked. Now, when I was in the military some years ago, we went through basic training, okay? And we had uniforms called BDUs, and our uniforms would identify us as part of the military, and we had insignias on our sleeve, which would associate us with a certain company. Now, the patterns on the BDUs were called camouflage, and camouflage come from this French slang word, which means to disguise. And see, with the use of colors and patterns, it often made it hard for others to see you. So you were able to blend in with your environment. And these patterns, the reason why they were what they were with the different colors and stuff was because of the terrain, the landscapes in the different climates. Now, through studying, I found out that there are over 10 types of camouflages, but the main three are for snow, which is the black, the white, and the gray. Okay. Then there is the one that's for desert and sand, which is what we're familiar with today because of, the Gulf War and because of Afghanistan. Okay, and this one is ground, that sand that blends into the sand. And the most popular of the 10 is the wood, which is the traditional green.
Right.
So tell somebody you have to look for it.
You have to look for it.
So when Joshua said unto him, or thou for us our adversary, he answered, Nay, but as captain of the host of the Lord am I now come. So my next point is, in order for others to identify and or associate you with the Lord, is you have to talk the talk. When Joshua asked, art thou for us or our adversaries? And he answered, Nay, but as captain of the host of the Lord am I now come. See, apparently Joshua, when he looked at him, he needed something else to identify him, to see if he was really on his side. Because his appearance wasn't enough. And this is why he asked the question. And see, when Joshua questioned him, he wanted to see what he would say. Okay? So his response, nay, but as captain of the host of the Lord am I now come. Now I want to read that in the Good News translation. Okay? And it says, neither, verse 14, neither, the man answered, I am here as the commander of the Lord's army. I'm going to read that again. Neither, the man answered, I am here as commander of the Lord's army. Now, the first thing that came to me when I heard this, and this is, I know that, the first thing that we learn is what we tend to hold on throughout our life. Now, but when I got this, I'm just going to say it. So I thought of the song, I'm a soldier in the army of the Lord. And I know we did it today, and this is nothing personal. But, when the question was asked, when Joshua asked the question, whose side are you on? He said, neither. But I am come as the commander of the Lord's army. Which means that the Lord's army are angels.
All right. Right?
Just want to throw that out. So the next thing is, when you ask a question, when you're trying to figure out things, you need to know what to listen for. You need to know how to listen. See, when he said, nay, but as captain of the Lord's army, some folks with bad understanding, as my mom was said, may have heard that you're not on my side. No, see, you're Catholic. You one of them sanctified people. You one of them Baptist folks that are hypocrites. And I come to tell you, there's nothing like a good church fight. I don't know if y'all have, and I know it doesn't happen here. So a lot of you might have to start the coffee. I know it doesn't happen here. But I've been around church folk, and I know how it is when it pops off. When it jumps off, Jesus don't be nowhere. And you better not dare say Jesus' name, because you'll get you and Jesus first time. But like I said, that's not y'all. So what we say says a lot about us. And in Matthew 12, it says, O generation of vipers, how can ye, being evil, speak good things? For out of the abundance of the heart does the mouth speak. Proverbs 18:21 says, death and life are in the power of the tongue. So what we say out of our mouth says a lot about us. Now going back to the military, in addition to the uniform that they gave us, we were also taught how to communicate the army way. And see, one thing about the military is very detailed. See, we had our own alphabet. We had our own language. They taught us how to echo commands. And so, for those that don't know, let me explain something. A company is made up of 4 platoons. And there is a platoon commander. There's a company commander. So you have the company commander, and each platoon has a platoon sergeant. So the echoing of the command, when they called this to attention, the commander, company commander would say company, and the platoon sergeants would say platoon. So in its entirety, it would sound like this: company, platoon, attention. See, and then they taught us how to respond to authority. We had discipline. So you had to look the look, talk the talk. And see what I understand, Pastor Taylor, I'm going to talk to you. See, I understand that these BDUs, these fatigues, you can buy them anywhere. Just like the Bible. You know, the Bible is the #1 selling book of all time. So you have to watch, because they'll try to fool you. You know, when they look the look and they talk the talk. Because you got some people that have that Esther spirit. Remember Esther from Fred Sanford? What she used to say? Oh, so when they know you're looking, oh, or follow and see what's really going on. And last but not least, in order for others to identify and or associate you with the Lord, is you have to walk the walk.
Right.
Verse 14 says, and he said, nay, but as captain of the host of the Lord am I now come. And Joshua fell on his face to the earth and did worship.
Yes.
And said unto him, what said my Lord unto his servant? Now see, the man's response dictated Joshua's actions. And see, we see in 14 that Joshua worshiped God. And see, worship suggests relationship and not religion. See, because worshiping is a lifestyle. It's bigger than just Sunday morning when you get here, then you want to worship. And I realize that worship is fairly new to us, because we grew up with devotion. We didn't do worship. So, you know, most of the time when it comes to worship, you know, we are not there yet. As a matter of fact, let me ask a question. How many people, if you knew God was here, you would take your worship to another level? By show of hands.
All right.
That's good.
Yes, sir.
I'm seeing hands. I'm seeing hands. I'm seeing hands. But guess what? The Bible says where 2 or 3 are gathered, that he would be. I didn't say it. Don't say that now. So here's the thing. There is so much connected to worshiping. And see, worshiping is an essential part of this walk. First of all, it's mandatory. I said that earlier today. It's mandatory. We were created to worship him.
Amen.
The Bible says, if you do not worship him, he will command the rocks to cry out for you.
Yes, sir.
Right? And then my mom would always say, and I don't need no rock to cry out my name. See, because praise is a weapon. And the benefits of worshiping him is, you know, like I said, the wholeness, the oneness, the love, the joy, the peace. Because there's something about being in his presence. But it's something that you have to practice. A habit. You need to be in the habit of worshiping. See, so when you understand the importance of worshiping, you move to a different level in the spirit.
That's right.
John 4 says, God is a spirit, and they that worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. So everything that we do should incorporate worship. So to walk this Christian walk is to worship. So now I ask the question, let me flip it. Whose side are you on? Now, I may make some folk mad, but I'm going to say what I need to say. And I'm going to, because I have, like I said, I've been in church all my life. And I see things that I think the average church folk does not see. I hear the people that leave church because of church folk. So I'm going to give it to you anyway. So understand this, to be on God's side, it's all about overcoming the tricks of the enemy. Saving lives. Spreading the gospel. And keeping his commandments. That's to be on God's side. But instead of focusing on that, many are majoring in minor things. And see, I like to call them like the modern day Great Sanhedrin Council. That's what they kind of remind me of. But they think that the religion belongs to them. Like none of y'all. None of y'all. And see, the thing is, they are more connected with what the pastor is preaching about. They're worried about the pastor not taking Jesus to the cross on Communion Sunday. What, he's taking him to the cross or getting him up, raising him up on Easter Sunday? I mean, on Communion Sunday. Well, whatever. That's what they're concerned with. The pastor preaching prosperity. And don't let him preach prosperity and have a nice car. They are concerned with the younger generation because of hip-hop and things like that. They're concerned with what used to be a secular song. They're concerned with the liturgical dance and the mimes, all of that. See, I remember when jazz wasn't accepted in the church. And they don't even have any lyrics in jazz. So imagine how crazy that is. You can't even play the music if you don't even know what the music is. But that's how it was. So my thing is, as long as the message remains the same, it shouldn't matter. Right? Because I know Hebrews 13 says, Jesus Christ is saying yesterday, today, and forever. So what that means is that the message will never change, even though the method may change.
Right.
Understand that?
Yes.
So you need to stop getting caught up in what and how they are doing whatever they're doing. You are not God. You cannot see the heart. And who are you to say what is and is not of God? You don't have the authority to do so. So I'm asking again, whose side are you on? Then there are the traditionalists. And see, I've come to understand that tradition is worth nothing. Just because you've been doing something for 40 years doesn't make it right. Accepted does not mean right. See, when they start talking about what we used to do, how many realize that the way you were having church even 50 years ago is not the way they was having church hundreds of years ago? Y'all do understand? Okay. So the Bible says, when it says that man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of God. And that word proceed means to go forward, go on, continue. And see, God's word proceeds out through God's mouth, and we should let it proceed out through us as a channel. No one can say or express what God means to you. No one can tell your testimony like you. Because the fact of the matter is, nobody knows what he's done for you. All right. So if you want to dance, dance. If you want to change the focus of a song and change it to God, change it.
All right.
If you cannot sing, but you can rap, rap. If you're a poet, write a poem.
All right.
Because our talents are different. But at the end of the day, it's all about him. It's all about him. It's all about him. See, and here's the thing. What we need to realize is, on God's side does not mean that you are God. Remember that. And next are the fashion police. Now, these are the people that's going to tell you what is and is not acceptable in God's house. Amen's getting some. I heard somebody tell me, yeah, but women did not wear pants back in the Bible days. Newsflash, men didn't either. How about that? And then the thing is, when it comes to dressing up in church, let me tell you this. Do y'all know that it wasn't until the end of the 1800s that you were even allowed to dress up in church? Because dressing up was considered ungodly.
Yes. Wow.
See, because it was associated with the rich people.
All right.
I'm looking at y'all. I'm looking. All right. John 3:17 says, "For God sent not his Son into the world to condemn the world, but that the world through him might be saved." And we've already said that you are not a soldier in God's army. So the thing is, maybe you need to do a little less policing and some more reaching.
Right.
Whose side are you on?
Right.
Even at war, if a foe is wounded, as a medic, you ought to do everything that you can do to save his life. But in the church, when somebody comes in smelling like alcohol, dressed like a lady of the evening, we're quick to condemn. So how is it that a wounded enemy on the battlefield in hostile territory can receive a more favorable acceptance than the wounded that comes off the street into the church? That doesn't make sense to me. Whose side are you on? And here's something that I used to struggle with. When I tell people about God and they reject it. And you know what God gave me? You accepted God when you were ready. And so it's the same way with everybody else that you talk to. If they don't accept them at that time, so be it. Some water, some plant, but God gives the increase. So don't be offended if they don't accept God. Ephesians 2:8 says, "For by grace you have been saved through faith, and it is not your own doing. It is the gift of God." Yes. And my thing is, when it comes to all of those things, if you hinder somebody from coming to God, whose side are you really on? Because that's not God. That's not God. And see, your actions must align with the word of God. And that is what walking the walk is. And see, walking in this sense is both literal and figurative. Now, going back to my basic training days, and like I said, we received the uniform. They taught us how to talk, the commands and the responses. And see, they even taught us how to walk. We were saying occasions that said 9 to the front and 6 to the rear. That's the way we do it here. And what that means is, when you swing your arm, the normal swing of the arm is 9 inches to the front and 6 inches to the rear. We'll say dress it right and cover it down, 40 inches all around. That means that when you stretch out your hand in each direction, it should be 40 inches between you and that next person. That's meticulous. So here's the thing. Anyone that saw the walk or heard the commands and responses would immediately associate the actions with the military. Simultaneously, we became proficient with the M16A2 rifle, and we learned how to survive in the field. And see, the purpose of basic training was to instill in us confidence and pride. And from the first day we wore the uniform, we knew that we represented something greater than ourselves, which was the United States Army. We knew that everybody didn't qualify to wear the uniform, and they made sure we didn't underestimate our purpose and our duty. We learned what to say and how to say it. This was the discipline, how we should carry ourselves around others. Until this day, I still remember how much pride I felt when I wore my uniform in public. We were required to know and learn our soldiers' manual, which was considered to be our Bible. We had to be proficient with our weapon. We had to learn how to disassemble it and reassemble it within a certain amount of time. Because after all, this was the thing that could save our lives in battle.
All right.
Right.
Now, upon graduating, we were equipped not only for war, but to be successful throughout our military career.
All right.
Now, let me tie this into God, because Ephesians 6 says something about a uniform.
Amen. All right.
It says, put on the whole armor of God, which is having your loins girt about with truth,
That's right.
and having on the breastplate of righteousness, and your feet shod with the preparation of gospel of peace. And above all, taking the shield of faith, wherewith ye shall be able to quench the fiery darts of the wicked. And last but not least, the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit,
All right.
which is the word of God. Now see, here's the thing. See, this should instill a certain confidence in you.
That's right. That's right.
This should remind you that you represent somebody greater than yourself.
All right. All right.
Therein lies the discipline.
All right.
Therefore, it should guide your tongue and alter your speech.
That's right.
You should be proficient with his word / your weapon. After all, it will save your life.
That's right.
But here's the most important thing that you want to remember. The Christian journey is a daily walk.
Yes, it is.
And not everybody is willing to walk the walk.
All right.
There is no designated period of training. Therefore, there is no graduation date. But there are rewards for being successful
There you go.
in this life.
Yes.
And that reward is eternal life. So my questions are, what does your lifestyle suggest? What does your conversation say about you? What and or who are people associating you with? Who's on the Lord's side?
All right.